All right, everyone, we have another environmental disaster, this time outside of Tucson, Arizona. Now, it's being improperly speculated by some that this is like in the middle of Tucson as a city, which would be a major disaster. It's actually not. It's technically not Tucson at all. It's on the outer metropolitan area. I've got the map open, and I'll tell you about some of the interesting things that are within that evacuation zone. And shelter in place is extended farther than that, so if you're like a mile away, it's like, yeah, keep your windows closed. Yeah, we're in the middle of Arizona, so this time of year it's probably already at least in the upper 70s, but you'll just have to make do without your air conditioning. That could be a problem. If you're closer to it, if you're on the interstate between a couple of their major side roads there's actually a standing evacuation order. This is nitric acid that was spilled. A truck was along the road and decided to fuck off over the side, I suppose, for some reason. It had a little oopsie. And there's video of nitric acid fuming up out of this particular wrecked truck, and I would not want to breathe that in. Nitric acid is not something to be played with. It is carcinogenic, by the way. Some people are speculating, well, oh my god, there's a mass sabotage attempt against the United States right now. It's obvious because there have been a couple of train derailments too. Sometimes things happen in clusters, so I'll keep an open mind, but it is kind of odd, the timing of this. It's number one. And number two, whenever there's a major disaster, people start looking into that news, and then they tend to encounter stories they wouldn't otherwise have encountered at a higher rate, and they get more attention than before. The fact that a truck decides to fuck off in Tucson is not necessarily related to the Ohio spill or to the Montgomery derailment that happened in Texas the other day. Again, though, we'll keep an open mind and say it's possible that that's the case. After all, somebody was posting the other day about how train derailers actually, like the legit actual system for deliberately derailing a train, those are unregulated. You can buy them for like $700. Probably if that's your plan, you wouldn't buy it online, though, because then you're leaving a digital data trail. Hey, there have been 13 derailments over the last month in this general area, and there's only one person whose internet history happens to be about buying train derailers. Probably not the brightest bulb. They probably would hurt themselves trying to deploy them if they're that fucking stupid. Anyway, we'll go through the map here a little bit. I would show you a graphic, but, I'm not that tech literate. There's not a whole lot going on in that particular area. To the south, it's hills. There are a handful of houses and maybe some farms or ranches down there. But, interestingly enough, this isn't far from the Tucson, United States penitentiary system. Yes, a major prison complex lies a couple of miles outside. They're in the shelter-in-place zone, so, they're not going anywhere anyway, and the prison air is so heavily filtrated that people literally complain about getting headaches from it, so probably not a big problem. Unfortunately, it happens to be almost smack dab right on an academy and high school. There's also a university attachment for the tech firms there, Tech Parks, Arizona, so a bunch of computer nerds. Now, I'm thinking that there might be a Tesla factor or something in this area because there's also a supercharger down there right off the highway. So this is Interstate 10. This is between, what was the roads? There's Reeder Road and Kolb Road, that general vicinity. Look it up for yourself. There's some shit going on down there. The evacuation probably impacts some tens of thousands of people. So there are going to be plenty of people inconvenienced. And then a major interstate is partially closed. People have to route around it, which means, hey, your morning commute might be a little bit longer. Yeah, why were you late for work today? Oh, yeah, I was coughing up lunger while I was going through the dispersed nitric acid cloud in the general vicinity. Oh, okay, take the corner office today so that nobody can hear your bloody coughing. And it is kind of weird when these things happen in clusters. We do have to realize, though, that when you've got, a million trucks on the road in a given day, a couple of them are going to have crashes. Sometimes they just happen to be carrying nitric acid. I wonder if the transport secretary will answer to this one. He hasn't answered much in the way of questions on the Ohio spill, which is going to cause a bunch of cancer, probably leukemia and pancreatic cancer down the road. But it's okay, though. If it happens when the administration's already over, they don't care too much about it. I wonder what would happen if someone drove through a cloud of nitric acid. Now, will it turn out that the trucking rules were modified at some point in the past to be more lax, and Buttigieg didn't look into that either? Probably will be the case. I'm sure they'll find a way to blame Orange Man, though, if it comes up in public questioning. One truck does not a massive disaster make, though, unless it was carrying something worse than nitric acid. But people are hyper-focused on these things right now. I think it's dovetailed in partially with the balloon stories. Of course, now they're saying, well, we've analyzed the other objects, other than the first spy balloon we shot down over Myrtle Beach. And we think that those were just, civilian objects or something. It doesn't seem like those had a military purpose. Interesting that all of this is happening to cover up that particular bit of news as well, because you fired a bunch of missiles at these things, and apparently they were never actually a threat. And apparently, and by the way, I would like to take a win. I know this is unrelated to the Tucson event. We'll touch on that just briefly in a minute. I would like to take a major win for several days beforehand, speculating that the reason why they were seeing additional objects was because they just weren't looking for high-altitude objects to begin with, except once they finally saw one on their radar. Once one was large enough and not stealthy enough so that they saw the Chinese spy balloon, once they were looking for objects, they found all sorts of shit over the skies that wasn't supposed to be there. This speaks volumes as well about the transport secretary, because I'm assuming that he has some role to play with regards to flight as well. It's a form of transport after all. I realize that there are other officials that are involved with air travel specifically. That's handled a little bit differently from rail because of the damage you can do with hijacking and shit like that. Military applications. Of course, Russia's not going to build a rail line to Alaska in order to invade the continent or anything like that. Well, you'd think that some questions would be asked of a non-military nature too. They were complaining that some of these objects were flying low enough that they were a hazard to air travel. Once again, something that Buttigieg is openly flippant about and refuses to ask questions, answer questions regarding. So freight, not his problem. Flights, not his problem. Trucks, those aren't his problem either. I'm wondering what his actual job is. What does he do all day other than, chest feeding or something like that? What does he do all day? One of his first acts as transport secretary was to take a month off. The average American worker wishes that they could do that and still get paid, Pete. As far as the Arizona event here, I would expect that there will be some localized problems. Someone's home has been filled with a little bit of extra scent. They might want to wash that down with some lemon pledge or something like that. I wouldn't expect that this is going to cause cancer clusters or something like that. If you have respiratory problems already, though, like if you get emphysema or asthma, you might want to wait a little bit longer than suggested to return to your home, and then scrub it down a little bit once you're done with that. Thankfully, this will actually degrade into the background at a conceivably, recent point, whereas the vinyl chloride burning off and releasing phosgene, etc. In Ohio, people downwind there not so lucky as the people of Tucson. Again, if you're in the middle of Tucson and you're seeing this story, this is nowhere near you. This is like 15 miles out of central Tucson. It's not going to travel that far. Looking at it, it looked like there was a light breeze probably blowing along the interstate. Yeah, people in the area, if you drove through the nitric acid, probably, you get some eye irritation. But to not be too glib here, I wouldn't worry quite so much about this one as the Ohio spill. But I figured that I would cover it because everyone's hyper-focusing on it and everyone's sending me news tips about it. Over 10 different people sending me a tip about this particular story overnight. Have a good morning commute. That's about all. Peace out.